Okay, guys, thank you guys for being on. Let me start from the very beginning and let you know that this will probably be a short class. What I'm actually ending up doing here is finishing up the latter part of last class. The last class, I thought I could get it all in an hour. Obviously didn't. So this is finishing that up. And then, but I don't want to start next week's class because next week's class, I don't want to jumble the two together. Excuse me. So, like I say, this may be a short class, but I think hopefully it'll be an entertaining class. So, with that, let's get started. Once again, I'll start this off by saying that this class, which is Leaving Christianity Now What, is not about bashing any sort of Christian or pastor or anything like that. And we do um, go take a look at some of the Christian doctrines and see if it holds up to scrutiny. And that's basically what this class is about. Um, Also, to encourage those that are thinking about leaving the church or have left the church and don't know where to turn. Noahide Nations is a great resource for that. They've got all sorts of classes, um, some self-study, some live classes, and we certainly encourage you to do that. It's we have been through this before. Everybody basically who is a Noahide today basically came out of a Christian church. The revitalization of the Noahide movement is not that old, so there's not that many children who were brought up in a Noahide family, and so we know what it's like to be out on an island. You're not Christian, you're not Jewish, you're somewhere in between. But there are plenty of resources and to go and study and research, and we also know the frustration of the Christian doctrine. We were all frustrated, and at some point in time, we took the initiative to study, and once you start studying the Torah and the Tanakh, um, thing your eyes are really opened up from there. So, with that, let's get started. And the title of tonight's lesson is the destruction and the rebuilding of the third temple. I want to close my public chat so I can just a little bigger here. And tonight, what I really hope to do is to be able to articulate just how absurd the statement by that is in the Gospels that Jesus said that he would rebuild the temple in 3 days. And we're going to take a look at why this could not have been a possibility. He could not have possibly made that statement in truth. And honestly, I don't even believe he made the statement. I think that's just attributed to him by the authors of the Gospels. I don't believe for a second that he made that statement. If he was indeed a uh, what they call a rabboni or rabbi, and he did know the scriptures, he would have never made that statement. So, with that, let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. Um, this is what I'm going to call the Hail Mary because this is like last week's class, the zombie resurrection. These are two last minute efforts to add some credibility to Jesus's life and ministry, in that these were last ditch efforts to fulfill prophecy. So let's take a look here at Matthew 26:61, and it said that this fellow said that, speaking of Jesus, this fellow said, "I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days." And then that's also in Matthew 27:40. In Mark 14:58, here again, this is at Jesus's trial. We heard him say, "I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands." So Jesus is actually, and these two quotes are attributed to Jesus. He didn't quote this himself. These are witnesses that said that they heard that. But when you get down to John, Jesus did say that, because Jesus answered them and said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews said to him, then the Jews said, this temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, that they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. Now, Jesus knew that the temple had to be a physical temple. It's an impossibility for him not to know. We'll find out why here in just a second. It was an impossibility for all the Jews in Jerusalem and all the Jews worldwide to know that there is no such thing as a bodily temple. There is no scriptural reference of a temple that is a body that would apply to Jesus, and it just, well, we'll see it. Let's go on. Just click. The reason it's an impossibility is because in Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48, there are 8 dedicated chapters about the building of the third and final temple, and it gives dimensions and measurements, and it is absolutely down to the minutest detail of what will take place when the third temple is built. So I'm not going to probably read the whole thing, but I'm going to read some of this just to give you a flavor of how the dimensions and everything are working. In the 5 and 20th year of our captivity, let me kind of set this up. Ezekiel is one of the prophets that were carried off into Babylon after the destruction of Judah, and they were there for 70 years. And here in the 25th year of their captivity, which means that we still had 35 years left in their captivity. But in the beginning of if my math is right, in the beginning of that year, in the 10th month on the 14th day, after the city would be Jerusalem, was smitten. In other words, this temple was destroyed, and Jerusalem was ransacked. The Lord came to me and brought me thither. And this is in the King James Version. I should have used a more easier to read version. In the visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel and set me upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of the city on the south. In other words, he brought him in a vision. He didn't physically bring him. He brought him there in a vision. And he brought me thither there. And behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a linen and flax in his hand and a measuring reed. And he stood at the gate. The linen and flax is a line. It's a measuring line. And then the measuring reed is just a reed that has measurement. They use to measure. And the man said unto me, Son of man, Ezekiel, behold with thy eyes and hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I shall show thee, for to the intent that I might show them unto thee art thou brought hither. In other words, I want to show you things, and you will show them. Declare all that thou seest to the house of Israel. And behold, a wall on the outside of the house was round about, and in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long by a cubit and a handbreadth. So he measured the breadth of the building 1 reed and the height 1 reed. Okay, so basically now God is showing Ezekiel, and he's beginning to do the measurements here of the outer court, and he's giving him the measurements of the outer court. And this goes on for 8 chapters, and I'm not gonna sit here and read all this. My reading is not that good, but it kind of gives you a flavor of what's going on here in the last verse there. It says, then he measured the porch on the gate 8 cubits, and the post thereof 2 cubits in the porch, and the gate was inward. So here we get a sense of what's going on here. Ezekiel is experiencing this vision from God where God is laying out the third temple and all its dimensions. So now, if we continue to go on here, there is in Ezekiel 41. I just want to bring out a point here. Like I said, these measurements are from Ezekiel 40 all the way through 48. But in 41, he specifically uses the word temple. And afterward, he brought me to the temple and measured the post 6 cubits broad and so forth, and get down at the very end. So he measured the length thereof 20 cubits and the breadth 20 cubits before the temple. And he said unto me, this is the most holy place. So it is talking about the third and final temple and the number of or the measurements. Now, in the Mishnah, which is one of the books of the Oral Torah, it is recorded as not recorded here in Ezekiel, but is it recorded in the Mishnah that God, in his discussion with Ezekiel, Ezekiel kind of pushed back on this, and he said, God, hey, we're in captivity. We're in a foreign land. Why don't you wait until we come out of captivity when we get back to Jerusalem, and then show us these dimensions? But we're still going to be in captivity. He knew that they were going to be in captivity for 70 years. So he says, we're still in captivity for a while. But God told Ezekiel, he said, not so, because he says that even though you're in a foreign land does not mean that they being the Jews, cannot study and comprehend the blueprint of the temple. And God goes on to further states that if the Jews will diligently study, or they diligently study the dimensions, it would be as if they were participating in the building of the temple themselves. So this is the reason that God gave it to them while they were in captivity, so that they could study the dimensions and the laws of the temple, and they would be credited that if they studied it diligently, as if they were actually building the temple themselves. So the second temple was a smaller, or excuse me, the second temple was larger than the first temple. Its outer court was larger than the first temple. But there's going to be some major differences between the second and third, with the first, second, and third temple. So the second temple, which was Herod's temple, which that was the one that was standing during the time of Jesus, was not the third and final temple. It could not have been, and we'll find out why here in just a second. The Jews knew this, and the writers of the Gospels apparently knew this as well, because it's a major prophecy that the Messiah, ben David, will build or rebuild the third temple. And so they also, like I said, they also knew that this was a major prophecy. So in what happens to be like I say, a last-ditch effort to establish some credibility within the Jewish community, they had Jesus rebuilding this temple, along with what we discussed last night, the resurrection of the dead. Those two things had to happen, because those are major prophecies, and neither one of them happened during the life and ministry of Jesus. And so they were thrown in just almost haphazardly it seems like at the last minute. And like I say, last week that was really out of place. So now there's going to be 4 unique characteristics about the third temple that were not in the first and the second temple. Now, the second temple set on an area that was like 500 by 500 cubics. Now, let me say this. Math is not my strong suit, and so I did not try to figure this thing out. The fact is, these figures come from Chabad.org, which is a Jewish website for an Orthodox Jew. So if these figures don't add up, take it up with Chabad. Say the second temple set on an area that was 500 by 500 cubits, with a biblical cubic being approximately 19 inches, 18.9 inches. The final temple will be on a plot of land that is measuring 3,000 by 3,000 cubits, which is, vastly larger than the previous two temples. Now, the final Temple Mount, not the temple itself, but the Temple Mount will be, and I heard that it's, and it varies, it even varies among the Jews, but anywhere from 6 to 8 times larger than the second temple. So now, excuse me, that I'm talking about the final temple now is 6 to 8 times larger than the second temple. Now, the Temple Mount, the area in which the temple sits, is anywhere from 36 to 18 times larger. Now, the reason that that's such a big gap is because the original temple, Solomon's temple, was, like I say, smaller. Herod's temple, Herod increased that area. He doubles the size of that. So whether the Temple Mount is 18 times larger or 36 times larger, it's still going to be vastly larger than what it is now. And the Temple Mount, according to some of those Jewish sources, say this is like approximately 512 acres, which is huge. I mean, that's a good sized ranch, even in Texas. So now, what I want to do something here. What is unique about this is there's going to be a major problem here. And so we'll see here in just a second. In fact, I am going to switch to the next slide. I've got my public chat open because I don't know how long it takes for this picture to come up. But when I pull up this picture, you're going to see there's going to be a problem with creating the Temple Mount or reestablishing a new Temple Mount that is 18 times larger or 512 acres. So I want to switch this now. When you get the picture, just type yes, so I know that you got the picture. And I'll wait. Okay, so we have a problem here. Well, I guess you could probably see my little red dot here. On the front of the picture, this is a current remains of the Herod's temple, the Temple Mount. The front, the left boundary, the back boundary where all the trees are, and then off to the right, you can see a straight line there, the right boundary. Now that's the Temple Mount area, and the new Temple Mount area is going to be 18 times that size. Even if we just took the Dome of the Rock in that little square there, and let's just say that that's the area of the third temple, and it's going to be 6 times larger, it cannot possibly fit within the confines of the normal Temple Mount as it is now. So if this is going to be this Temple Mount area, it's going to be 18 times larger, it won't even fit in this page. All these buildings and businesses and homes and cemeteries and schools and hospitals, it's just not going to fit there. So this is going to be truly an act of God to expand this to the third and final temple. How Hashem is going to do this, we just have to wait and see. There is a debate among Jews that the Messiah, being David, will usher this in, and that he will be the leader of the construction of the third temple. There's also an opposing view that God himself will build this third temple, and he will just bring it down. It'll come down from the heavens. It'll come down through the clouds and be set on top of this other one. Whichever one is true, we'll just have to simply wait and find out. But if it is built with human construction, then there's going to have to be a lot of demolition going on. I guess that's just the best way to say that. So now let me get back to that slide. So one of the second things that is going to be unique about the third temple is that the temple itself will be square. The previous two temples were more in a rectangle shape, but the third temple will be square. Now get past this. The third unique thing about the
You
third
are
temple.
currently the only person in this conference.
The third thing about this, third unique thing about this, is that iron will be allowed to be used in this construction. In the previous temples, that was not the case, especially Solomon's temple. And we see this in 1 Kings 6:7, and it says, "In the house where it was in building was built of stone, made ready before it was brought to the site. And there was neither hammer nor axe or any tool of iron heard in the house while it was building." So, so obviously, the question is, well, then what changed in the what changed in the final temple? Um, the the reasons that the rabbis give is that the temple, the third temple, on the other hand, will be built in the Messianic age, where swords will be beaten into plowshares and iron will be used for only the positive. That really basically nullifies the prohibition of using metal in the construction of the temple. Now, in Ezekiel 40 through 48, it not specifically says that iron will be used in the construction, but it did not prohibit it as either. And so the rabbis and the sages take this to mean that this will be allowed in the construction. A further explanation about the iron being used in a temple is that the sages say that the first two temples, iron was an element that was used for war, and consequently the shortening of life. In other words, iron was used to kill people during war. The purpose of the temple was to make peace between God and man, and thereby lengthening one's life. Hashem determined that it would be improper to build a life-sustaining structure with material that was used in the very opposite manner, in a life-taking manner. So, but I think at this point, most sages and scholars will agree that the rebuilding of the temple is one of the last of the major prophecies that the Messiah ben David will do. He will fight the wars of God. He will bring back all the Jews. There will be a number of things that he does, but it's the building of the temple and the resurrection of the dead will be probably the last two things of those 6 or 8 or 10 major prophecies that the Messiah ben David will do. A fourth thing is that all flesh will stream to it, it being the third temple, continually. In Isaiah 66:23, this, of course, is a messianic prophecy as well. "And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Shabbat to another, shall all flesh, including the Gentiles, come to worship before me, saith the Lord." That has not happened, so that is definitely a messianic prophecy. Then in Isaiah 2:2-4, "And it shall come to pass in the last days, which we have not experienced yet, that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it." That obviously has not taken place yet. "And many people shall go and say, Come ye, let us go up unto the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." I think that it's either in Ezekiel or one other book that last verse is on the wall of the United Nations about beating the swords and the plowshares. So you can see that this obviously Isaiah 2 and Isaiah 66 have not taken place yet. They're certainly haven't melted down the tanks and turned them into tractors yet. So, and nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Well, that certainly hadn't happened yet as well. But all nations will come to it. In the Midrash, it states that during the eras of the first two temples, that the Jews made pilgrimages 3 times a year. But in the era of the final temple, people will go to it the first of every new month. And of course, this was not possible or even practical during the previous 2 temples. I mean, you sometimes you had to walk 50, 75 miles. You did that 3 times a year. You certainly couldn't do that, the first of every month. But in the days of the final temple, according to the Midrash, the sages say that there'll be clouds to transport him to Jerusalem and to the temple. Now, I'm really not sure that they're talking about physical clouds or they're talking about virtual clouds, but I found it very interesting that they're using terminology like streaming to it and going there by way of clouds. So it could very well be talking about in our day and age with our technology that certainly it's even possible now if they had that, everybody could stream to that teachings the first of every month. That's possible even in our day and age. So that very well be what is spoken of here. Only time will tell. Just a few more verses here to validate what we've been saying here. Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy when my sanctuary is among them forever. Talking about the third temple and the bringing back of the people, the exiled people. I will bring back my exiled people, Israel. They will rebuild the cities, the ruined cities, and live in them. They will plant vineyards and drink their wine. They will make gardens and eat their fruit. I will plant Israel in their own land, never again to be uprooted from the land that I have given them. Third temple will stand forever. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east. I will gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Of course, that's in Isaiah 43. Let them construct a sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them. It's Exodus 25:8. And it's talking about the first and second temples. It's talking about the third temple as well. The glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. And this is in Ezekiel. This is talking specifically about the last temple. I heard someone speaking to me from inside the temple. He said, "Son of man," it's still the same conversation that we had a while ago with Ezekiel. "This is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever." That too is very messianic. Now, one of the reasons that I am emphatic that Jesus should have known this is when we look in the Gospels, Jesus is called a rabbi. Jesus supposedly knew the Torah. In fact, is in Luke 4:16 and 17, it reads that when he, this being Jesus, came to Nazareth where he was brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him, and he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. You had to do that. You had to know the scriptures very, very well. If he knew Isaiah, he knew Ezekiel. Also in Luke there, 24, 25 to 27, and they asked, then he said to them, then this is after his resurrection, oh, how foolish you are, and slow of heart to believe that all the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer all these things and then enter into his glory? Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in the scriptures, which here again, I don't believe that Jesus actually said that. I believe that that was attributed to him. But even at that, it states there that Jesus explicitly knew the scriptures. If he knew the scriptures, he knew by way of Ezekiel that the third temple is a physical temple built on the exact same spot as the second temple. So therefore, that's why they said he had to destroy the temple. If he was a Messiah, he was to rebuild or remodel the existing second temple. And you can see that there's going to have to be some major, even in the day of Jesus, there was villages and all sorts of buildings and schools and cemeteries in and around that temple. And it would have been a virtual impossibility to do that during Jesus' time. It seems like it's almost a virtual impossibility to do it our time, but the Messiah ben David will get it done. Okay. This is one thing that Jesus is supposed to be the final sacrifice, the perfect and final sacrifice, and that when the new temple is built, that sacrifices will not be offered, but that's not true. Here, many think that the animal sacrifices have been done away with forever, but according to Bible prophecy, it's simply not so. The Lord tells the prophet Ezekiel that in the future temple, the prescribed sacrifices will be offered. And it quotes Ezekiel 42 here, where we've been reading. The north and south rooms facing the temple courtyard are the priest rooms, where the priest who approach the Lord will eat the most holy offerings. They will be put there. They will put the most holy offerings, the grain offerings, and the sin offerings, and the guilt offerings, for the place is holy. So you'll see that we studying from Sin and Atonement on week 2 of this thing, that Sin and Atonement, the sin offerings were, lambs or bulls. And so blood sacrifices, offerings will be made in the third and final temple. So even if Jesus's body was a temple, then he's still not the final sacrifice. So, all right. Okay, that kind of concludes that, but I want to go one thing here and offer this to you guys. This is a side-by-side comparison of the Gospels, because we've been talking about the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And what this is, I ran across this several years ago, and I typed it out on a Word document, and this has just 3 questions here, and I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but the whole thing is like 18 or 20 questions. But this is really, really good to have, because if you get into discussion with Christians and you say that, man, there's all sorts of contradictions, and they say, no, there's not any contradictions. Well, pull this 3-page document out and say, look, why don't we get a cup of coffee, sit at the kitchen table, you get your Bible, I'll get a Bible, and we'll go through this and we'll look it up and we'll compare them side by side. And on the first question there, on which day was Jesus crucified? Well, you have someone go to John, you have someone go to Mark, you have someone go to Luke and Matthew, and then put all the answers down. And it's amazing that Christians very rarely, if ever, look at this on a side-by-side comparison. When they see this at a side-by-side comparison, you're going to get different answers. You know, obviously, John has a different answer than the synoptic gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke. You go to the next question: what time was Jesus crucified? John's going to have him crucified at noon. Mark's going to have him crucified at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's pretty significant. That's a, you know, and you go on to who bore the cross. John's going to have Jesus carrying the cross the whole way. Well, whereas Matthew, Mark, and Luke will have Simon carrying the cross part way. And you could, and these would just go on, and like I say, I think these are 18 to 20 questions. I think I only did like three slides here. But you know, let me get back to 6. When you get to number 6 here, that's going to be a real problem for them. That always stumps them. It always stumped me. Jesus prophesied that he'd be in the belly of the earth, just as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights. That's Matthew 12:40. So how long was Jesus in the grave? Let them figure it out. Let them try to figure it out. And it'll be a real eye-opening experience for your Christian friends. So if you guys want this, just type in yes, and I will send this. I'll send this to you guys. So with that, like I say, this was going to be a short class. Let me tell you what next class is going to be about. And then next class will probably be my last class for a while. I'm going to take a break because I want to do Isaiah 53, Isaiah chapter 53, which is a huge thing for Christians. Christians, anytime they talk about proselyting the Jews or ministering to the Jews, they always bring up Isaiah 53, and they are well versed on it. So I want to do this and make that an in-depth study, but it's going to take me 4, 5, or 6 weeks to put that together, and I anticipate that being probably a 4 lesson, maybe 5 lesson teaching on Isaiah 53. So next week we'll have one more class, and then I'll take a break for about 4 or 5 weeks. Then I'll come back and do Isaiah 53. And maybe Ray can find someone to teach in the interim, or if not, then we'll just, give it a spring break, so to speak, Corona break, so to speak, and then and do that. So, okay, so, all right, I've got your guest user, I've got your email address, so I will send it to you as soon as I get off tonight. So with that, do you have, is there any questions from you guys? I guess not. So, all right, well then, expect this to come in a separate document, and then I'll send you what I was going to send you the other day as well. So with that, guys, I'll see you guys same time next week. Bye.